Mr. Peters, you're bringing forward proposals, a motion to Tynwald, proposing a referendum on net zero. Why has this come about?
I've got to admit, it wasn't my idea. It came from Paul Quine, who is a former MHK and currently an airline captain again. And he came up with the idea of a referendum because he and I both think that every time the government talks about net zero, they say that the majority of the population is for it and is for all the money that we're spending on net zero. Certainly, 9 out of 10 people I speak to are against it. They think it's a complete waste of money that could be better spent on schools, on healthcare and roads and all the rest of it. So I just want to establish in this referendum exactly how much public support there is for it to inform the next administration.
Now, some people have been very critical of you for doing this because you're on record many times being a long critic of the climate change programme. How confident are you that you will be able to get this motion through Tynwald?
I don't know that it will go through because last December I brought a motion to say we ought to just pause net zero for a while, take stock, decide whether or not the amount that we were spending was doing any good or not. And that was roundly defeated. So it was, I think 5 of us voted for that. Everybody else voted to continue with net zero. So I don't know that it's going to proceed beyond December, but what it does do is that it will inform people before the next election about exactly where people stand on this. And I think that that's important. And to me, this isn't about net zero. I've made my opinion about that known for many years. I'm not even trying to convince people of my position on it. What I do want to do is to establish whether or not the people of the Isle of Man agree with spending millions of pounds on something that's achieving nothing.
Some of your critics would say that you've been elected to make decisions on behalf of the people. We can't have a referendum every time something comes up. Because direct democracy isn't always the answer. So what's different about this one? Why do you think it's justified in this case?
What's different about this is that, and I agree, I don't think that we should have referendums all the time about things. What's different about this is that we've got a perfect vehicle for it. We've got a general election next September. And to me, this is as simple, and a lot of the people that have criticised this are saying, oh, it's a vast amount of money to spend on a referendum. No, to me, on the bottom of the ballot paper is a line that says, do you agree with government's policies and spending as far as net zero is concerned? Yes, no. Simple as that. So, only people who are voters can have a say in this. So it's not going to be hijacked by any of these special interest groups. And we're going to find out what's happened at very little cost. So I think the fact that there's a general election next year is what minded me to think that this would be a good idea.
As you say, we're only a year away now from a general election. Some of your critics have accused this of an electioneering stunt. What would you say to them?
Absolutely not. It's an absolute nonsense. I'm on record for the last 4 years as being often the sole member who's questioned net zero and climate change. So there's no change in things as far as I'm concerned, and it's certainly not electioneering, I can promise you that.
How much of this criticism do you feel is the pro-lobby trying to marginalise you and make you out to be some sort of climate change denier loon?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's the way like I say, this isn't really about climate change as such. That's not the purpose of this. It's about democracy and letting people have a say and finding out what people really think about it. But that's the way that the climate change lobby operates. It marginalises people. If you look back over the years, where's David Bellamy these days? He was on TV all the time. He dared to say that he thought climate change was a nonsense, and he's been completely deplatformed. It's happened all over the world. I can't remember his name, but one of the guys who founded Greenpeace came out eventually and said, on reflection, I think climate change is a bust. I don't think it's for real. Completely marginalised, called a nutter and all that. So that's the way that these people work, in that they will try and marginalise, try and cancel anybody who goes against the narrative.
So if you are just this fringe climate change denying loon.
Yeah.
What do you think they're afraid of by supporting your motion for a public referendum?
Well, I think what they're probably most afraid of is that the tide is changing. So 5 years ago, if you'd have asked 100 people on the street in the run-up to the last election, you know, do you agree with greener, cleaner, sustainable and like all that stuff, you know, having our own energy windmills and solar panels, most people would have said yes. I think 95% of people would have said yes, because who doesn't want those things, right? Now people are starting to see what the actual cost of this is, what the effect is. So Eristane, and I'm not bothered if there's a windmill farm down at Eristane or not, but people down there do care about it an awful lot, so they're seeing what the cost of this is. And you know, I don't think even when I was elected I understood the cost as far as the taxpayer is concerned. So my first budget was in 2022, and the minister at the time, the Treasury Minister at the time, David Ashford, stood up and he said, and of course we've committed even further to climate change, and we've allocated £40 million. And you know, I'd not seen that when I'd read the Pink Book or whatever. £40 million for climate change. So my question is, what has that achieved? And they would probably say, well, we didn't spend all of it, but what they have spent hasn't achieved a thing. So, you know, I think people need to have a say about it. And I think that if you ask the same 100 people now, do you agree with the government's plot as far as climate change is concerned? I think that probably less than 50% of people would say yes. And it's a global phenomenon. So many people are now seeing the light as far as climate change is concerned. The fact that it's a cyclical, natural thing, and that CO2's got nothing to do with it, is my view. Now, I'm not trying to convince anybody else of my view, but that's my view, and that of an awful lot of world-class experts.
But would you agree we need to do better things for our environment to make the place a nicer place to live? And what could be done if for some reason they did cancel this fund? What sort of initiatives would you like to see so that we are living in a nice environment?
Okay. I think that market forces have got to play in this. So I think when it becomes cheaper to put an air source heat pump in than it does a gas boiler, then that's when people will do it. You know, when we start to talk about putting solar panels on garage roofs and things like that, rather than just have solar panel farms in the countryside taking up, you know, agricultural space, then I think that people will do it. So I think it's led by market forces. I don't think it's down to government to try and force people into this. And it strikes me that it's more a cult than a science, and that really bothers me. And I'm not a climate scientist, although I did have to take an exam once in meteorology, which is more than most of my critics have done. But, you know, this started to smell off to me back in 2006 when the Inconvenient Truth film came out, because I watched it and I thought, that's not factual, that's propaganda. And it's very expensive propaganda. And how can he afford to make a film that's cost that much money? You know, there's something behind this. And so I've been uneasy about climate change ever since. And like I say, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert, but I've been around a while and I know when things are off.
How does it make you feel when people say to you, well, the science is settled on this?
Well, it's not settled. I mean, the whole thing about this 97% consensus is fraudulent. You know, it wasn't 97% of scientists around the world who agreed that climate change is man-made. It was 97% of people at a conference or something like that, and it was maybe 100 people who were asked about it. And the question was, do you think climate change is real? That was what 97% of them agreed to. When they were then asked, is it man-made? It was a tiny percentage who thought it was man-made. Yet we've been sold this lie that 97% of scientists around the world all believe that climate change is man-made.
Finally, what message would you give your Tynwald colleagues today about your motion? What's the message you'd like to give them about giving this motion consideration?
Well, I would say that it's not about climate change. So you're welcome to your position on climate change. This isn't about that necessarily. This is about democracy. This is about, you know, various government departments saying that the majority of people in the Isle of Man are all for net zero. I don't believe that that's true. and this will find out once and for all. So even if they are the most ardent green climate change people, they can't disagree with the idea of asking people what they think about it.